Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, well, we'll wait a little bit to see the rest of the class show up. Hmm.
Hi, Professor. Good evening.
Good evening. We're just waiting for the rest of the class to show up. Hmm. Okay. We should have 8 more students, but not going to wait. Uh, So, good evening, everybody. Dr. Stu McConnell. Nice to meet you. And the way that I do the class is that I have a lecture with questions, and I count everybody to join in with the questions, and providing their viewpoints on everything. And then after that, I'll break you out and to do uh, a team exercise that you'll be doing each week. Okay. So let me share my screen. Should be able to see my slides.
Yes, Professor.
All right.
Enterprise software engineering must be understood as a socio-technical discipline rather than a coding activity. At enterprise scale, systems embed workflow, compliance rules, governance structures, and organizational policy into executable logic. The defining distinction between application development and enterprise engineering is systemic impact. Small applications tolerate improvisation. Enterprise systems do not. Enterprise systems operate across departments, business units, and often regulatory jurisdictions. Consider a healthcare claims platform integrating billing, electronic health records, pharmacy management, audit logging, and cybersecurity enforcement. A defect in one component can cascade across financial reporting, regulatory compliance, and patient service delivery. Enterprise impact multiplies consequence. Engineering discipline introduces validation checkpoints, architectural modeling, test strategy, traceability, and change control. Programming ensures code correctness. Engineering ensures sustainability, governance, and operational resilience across the lifecycle. Lifecycle accountability means deployment is the beginning of responsibility, not the end. Enterprise systems must be monitored, secured, scaled, audited, modernized, and eventually retired with data integrity preserved. Technical debt in this environment becomes financial and operational liability.
Okay. So let's go on to
Interaction effects define large-scale systems. Complexity increases.
okay. So what we're doing here is I'll give you a scenario and then we'll answer the questions. And what I need from you is your answers, your viewpoints. So the scenario is there's a regional hospital network is replacing its legacy patient record system with a cloud-based integrated platform connecting billing, pharmacy, labs, and insurance verification across 3 states. Okay, so this is a very dispersed and diverse type system. The vendor promises rapid deployment, but HIPAA compliance and audit traceability must be preserved across all transactions. So anyone can answer this. What characteristics would make that a systems enterprise level? Just think about what an enterprise system is.
I think it's because more like a kind of like a like a cross-functional systems. You have various systems with like billing, pharmacy, labs, and stuff like that. Um, so that kind of makes it like an enterprise system itself. It's not just serving like a single team or a single set. I'll have like a single purpose, but it's more like a cross-functional type of system itself.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else wants to add on to that?
Yeah, I can add a few more details to that. So, in my opinion, enterprise system, I think first thing it should complain all complaint regulations and compliances, and it should be scalable and should be performant. There shouldn't be any bottlenecks, right? If there are any bottlenecks, it will impact performance, and then end user might get impacted.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So what kind of integration risk do you think the team will need to address before deployment of the new system?
I think, Professor, like I'm thinking
cybersecurity risk, like the security risk, it needs to be addressed. And the second thing, I would like to go with data leaks or data breaches, or like any personal information we are exposing to outside of the patient, outside of the people. That's three things we can take care about this.
Okay. Any other risks?
I think the data, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, I think the data migration might be an issue. We have to make sure that the data in the new system is consistent with the data in the old system.
Okay. Yeah. They've got to maintain that data integrity, don't they?
Yeah.
All right. So what kind of governance controls do you think are going to be required for long-term sustainability?
I think just having like some sort of access control, because you have various systems. There's a lot of sensitive information with like pharmacies, prescriptions and stuff like that, labs, even for billing. So having sort of like some role-based access control, I think that's one governance control you can have for like a long-term stability for the system.
Okay. All right. Anybody want to add on to that? Okay. We'll go to the next one.
Multi-team development introduces organizational complexity. Teams interpret requirements differently unless governance structures and interface contracts are explicit. Integration becomes the moment where hidden assumptions surface. If integration is deferred, defects become exponentially more expensive to correct. An extended lifecycle is not optional. Enterprise systems operate for years or decades. Backward compatibility, migration planning, and vendor dependencies must be designed from inception. Security exposure increases with integration density, APIs, and user volume. Complexity is organizational and regulatory as much as technical.
Okay, so now we're looking at what goes into a large scale system. So the scenario for this one is you have a retail company integrates e-commerce, their warehouse, their point of sale, and finance all into one platform. Okay, good definition of the enterprise. Each department built modules independently before the integration. During launch, reconciliation failures disrupt revenue reporting. So, in other words, there's some issues going on with this. So when did complexity become an organizational risk in this scenario?
For me, though, I think like every department building into one single platform, which means there's a lot of cross-team posting to the same, or having, their code in a single platform, which means that we can have like complexity with like people making change that's unrelated to that relates to their own domain that can affect some other domains platform. I can see that being like a particular complexity that can arise when you have multiple teams building on a single platform.
Okay. So going along with that thought, let's go to the second question. How could architectural governance have prevented failure in this case?
I think each module, before even started their feature implementation date, I think they should at least design the component and then have a discussion among the teams and agree upon some contract. So once we got agreement on contract among each integration, each module, I would say, I think that will eliminate a lot of integration failures. So, and also after implementation and before launch, there should be one integration testing. So if teams did that, I think they can potentially avoid any failures during launch.
Okay, anybody want to build onto that? Because
Yes,
go ahead.
yeah, I would like to add we can perform a pilot approach. So direct pilot approach means don't deploy 100% at a time. We can do by percentage. For example, 5% we can deploy one time. Next row 10%, 20%, 25%, like that. So if we have any issues, we can eliminate at early stage itself, and we can't affect the entire customers, stakeholders to affect those changes. That's what I'm thinking. Pilot approach is the best way.
Okay, yeah, that's an agile approach. Okay, have iterative releases.
Yeah.
So very good. And I think we covered the last question too, because those integration controls were already talked about. All right.
Multi-team development introduces organizational complexity. Teams interpret requirements differently unless governance structures and interface contracts are explicit. Integration becomes the moment where hidden assumptions surface. If integration is deferred, defects become exponentially more expensive to correct. An extended lifecycle is not optional. Enterprise systems operate for years or decades. Backward compatibility, migration planning, and vendor dependencies must be designed from inception. Security exposure increases with integration density, APIs, and user volume. Complexity is organizational and regulatory as much as technical. Lifecycle models represent governance philosophies. Waterfall emphasizes structured phase progression and documentation integrity. It performs well where regulatory evidence is required or requirements are stable. Its weakness is rigidity in uncertain domains. Incremental models reduce risk by delivering functionality in stages. Evolutionary models refine requirements through feedback. Agile emphasizes adaptability, collaboration, and rapid iteration. Hybrid approaches combine structured oversight with iterative delivery, common in enterprise contexts where compliance cannot be abandoned. Model selection is strategic. It reflects regulatory exposure, cultural maturity, and tolerance for uncertainty. Choosing the wrong lifecycle structure introduces systemic inefficiency before coding begins.
Okay. So before I go into the question, how many are familiar with these type of software development life cycles? So
I am, I guess. Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Well, one.
I think agile, for me, is kind of our primary way of development in our team. We regularly have a sprint, which kind of like a 2 weeks sprint, and with daily stands up and just progress or something like that. So
Okay.
that's the one I'm most familiar with.
All right. Yeah. Has anybody worked waterfall?
No,
Daniel, I
really,
see your hand raised.
yeah, really, I didn't work on that waterfall method, but I have basic idea when I started my career. So initial terms, I heard about this waterfall method. So coming to waterfall method, all the requirements will gather one time. There is no sprint wise approaches. So if you want to add or do any kind of changes, at end of our requirement, we will add the features and all. So once the project is done and at the last stages, we will add the requirement. So it's over hectic kind of say, I hear, Professor.
Yep. When I started working software, and also just project management, we did the waterfall. Like you said, all the requirements was given up front.
Yeah.
We were given a timeline. We were given what the scope was, and we didn't release anything until the whole project was done.
Yes.
Yep. And at that time, if the stakeholders or the client who bought the project wanted changes, then we had to put in, a change request and go through the whole process again. Yep.
Yeah, that's
Okay. Well, let's go to the question real quick. So we have a financial services firm chooses Agile for compliance-heavy reporting system. Regulators require formal documentation, yet sprint cycles move faster than validation processes. Okay, so just a little bit of background. Agile hates documentation, because they want to have things out. So, was Agile alone sufficient for this?
No, I think like you mentioned, obviously Agile, it's very fast paced, so there's not a lot of chance for like documentations and stuff like that. And from a financial, I guess, perspective, and just from like a regulators, you kind of need like in terms of like, formal documentation, as well as having some of those regulatory documentation like traceability. So we just like audits and stuff like that should exist in the system. So I would say no.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that leads us into the second question. How could a hybrid model reduce that type of exposure?
Um, I guess like a hybrid model, like a dual approach. Maybe Agile can be used for like development and for fast track a lot of stuff, like in terms of like milestone or like features and stuff like that. But in parallel, like another model can be used for more of the documentation aspect. I think those two can maybe kind of work in hand in this particular case. But like you stick with Azure for like just development, and then another model for more of the regulatory documentation and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, the most common hybrid is waterfall and agile. You use agile for what you were saying, a lot of the features and functionality. You use agile to give that type of iterative releases. And the waterfall aspect, you have two parts of a team. You have the agile team and then the waterfall team. The waterfall team goes through, does all the documentation, and they flow through type testing and things. So, okay. So the last question, what kind of risk do you think will arise from lifecycle misalignment? Especially in this scenario, you have regulatory requirements, but you also using agile to do fast releases. So what kind of risk are we having?
So I can add a few more points to that, Professor. So the first thing, if the life cycle choice is misaligned with a type of project we pick, right? So deadlines might miss, deliverables might miss one thing, and there could be some leaks in terms of validation or requirements missing.
Okay.
So, yeah, I can think of.
All right. Well, let's move on.
Agile reduces the distance between assumption and validation. Short iterations allow teams to detect requirement misalignment early. Stakeholder engagement increases alignment between technical implementation and business value. However, enterprise stakeholders are plural, not singular. Compliance, security, operations, finance, and customer support often impose constraints that complicate prioritization. Scaling Agile requires architectural governance, disciplined shared interfaces, and automated testing infrastructure. Agile succeeds when leadership supports adaptability while maintaining accountability. A ceremony without cultural change results in superficial adoption.
Okay. So now we're talking, if you read through the course a little bit, we're going to be looking at things through the Agile perspective. Later on in the class, I'll give you what the Agile mythology is. Okay. But I'll lead off. Does anybody know what the Agile mythology is?
Can add to that, Professor. Not sure if it is right or wrong, but as far as my understanding, so agile methodology is basically breaking down your entire project into small milestones and then engaging your team in sprint-based implementation. Meaning, so you pick one milestone and then try to complete it in like two weeks. So we call it as a sprint. And then you design, develop, and deliver that milestone in that 2 week sprint. And then move on to another milestone. So at the end, maybe after 1 quarter or 2 quarter, you'll have finished the product, but intermittently you'll have all these milestones. That way, you can does that you have some checkpoints so that you don't miss your end goal and end delivery date.
Yeah, and that's why you have your stand-ups and everything like that. Very good. Yeah, I'll give you the later on. I'll probably post it in the announcements what the whole Agile framework is. Very good. No, you covered it. All right. So here's our scenario. We have an enterprise mandate sprints and stand-ups, but retains centralized approval for all changes. Teams cannot respond quickly to stakeholder feedback. First question, is this a true Agile implementation?
No.
Why?
So in Agile implementation, basically you keep on accepting new requirements. If your stakeholder have different requirement, new requirement than what we initially agreed upon. So by Agile, by definition, you take new requirements also as you implement existing requirements.
Okay, right. That's right. Basically, the client comes first, no matter what. And also, talking about Agile teams, Agile teams are autonomous. They work within each other. There's no central person, so it's the team. So, but and this one deals with Agile teams that are, very diverse. What cultural barriers limit agility?
I'm not sure if it is related to any cultural barrier or not. Maybe communication is the key in Agile teams, right? So if and team members has to be open in taking feedback as well, right? So if someone comes to you and say that, hey, this is how we wanted to implement, and this should be the contract, right? If you implement in different way, you have to accept that feedback and adjust your implementation accordingly. So by any means, you have any difficulty, maybe if your culture come into picture and it hampers how you pursue that feedback, I would say that could be a culture barrier, but
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would add one more point, Professor, for that one, like Xylo mentality. For example, in the Agile methodology, dev, QA, product, and everything needs to be come together and work on the requirement. If any of the team misses anything, then like they need to be in a single point. So if they work Xylos, then it's one of the barrier for Agile.
Okay. Yeah. Especially when you have diverse teams with different cultural attitudes, uh, especially, when you're dealing with cultures that have a very firm look at authority, or you have, uh, there's some cultures that look at different genders as being worthwhile or not. So, yeah, that can always, cause some issues. So, looking at all the diversity and everything, how should governance adapt to that?
I would say like have more of a continuous type of improvement mindset instead of like having like a pre-approval for everything. I think continuous improvement is one of the key objective of Agile in general. So if we have like say like a continuous improvement plan, and then instead of having pre-approval, we can have that in place, and then we can have some other type of stuff to like reduce risks. I feel like is the biggest issue with why it's taking like a more centralized approval before any change, just to because of risk. So we can have some sort of automated or like integrated testing that reduce some of those risk concerns with like new changes and stuff like that. So yeah, I would say have more of like a continuous improvement, um, I guess, system instead of like a pre-approval type of
Okay.
scenario. Yeah.
For those that have been in agile teams, have your agile teams worked under a team charter? Basically, when you first meet for the project, you come in as a team, you lay out, how you're going to work, uh, how conflict's going to be handled, how communication is going to be handled. So, anybody familiar with that if you work on a team?
I mean, the beginning of the project, right? I mean, the team get together and look at the skill set of each resource, and then they'll decide how going forward how we are going to maintain the communication and which channels would be the primary to send out the communications or communicate between the teams. Would there be any daily stand-ups or monthly checkpoints? And who would be the who would lead all these discussions? Who would be the scrum master? All those discussions. I think at the beginning of the project, team get together and decide. Not sure if that would be the governance in this case, but
Yeah. See, well, one thing you're bringing up is that, in agile teams, the governance happens at the team level. The team decides how they're going to work. It's not directed to them. So the agile team, as a team, decides how they're going to govern themselves. Okay.
Distributed development alters the mechanics of coordination. Informal communication channels disappear. Work must be designed for asynchronous understanding. Clear documentation, explicit contracts, and version governance become foundational. Time zone latency introduces handoff risk. Delayed clarification increases the likelihood of incorrect assumptions. Stable tool chains become the across geography. Cultural norms influence escalation behavior and the candor of feedback. Distribution magnifies both opportunity and coordination costs. Governance discipline becomes the differentiator between innovation and fragmentation.
Okay, we were talking a lot about this. What do you think is time zone latency?
When these days, teams separated by time zones, right? I mean, there will be some development teams in India, in some teams in US, some teams in Canada. So time zone latency here, meaning different teams work in different time zones, but they wanted to accomplish the same goal at the end of the day. So this time difference, I would say, is a time latency.
Okay, yeah. All right, so here's our scenario to talk about. Back-end development occurs in one region, okay, front end in another. So you have the back end, basic, the server side, and then the front end, which is the user side. The API changes are shared informally, keyword, leading to repeated integration failures. What kind of structural weaknesses exist here?
I think you just have like an informal type of communication in terms of like the API changes. Typically, you want to have like a more of a contract that's like the teams are aligned on and documented, and then teams can share their feedback on that said contract, and then if everyone agrees, can be like the finalized particular contract. But having more of like a sort of like an informal API communication is kind of hard to know what the actual what I guess the source of truth is. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It does. And you talked a little bit about the second one. So when we're dealing with API, okay, since the controller of things or how things are going to work, you know, what kind of governance should be structured? Should there be no talking about API changes informally? Should it always go through a formal channel?
I think it's also about a contract between the front end and the back end engineers, and any change that has to formally go through a contract changes if there is any changes in the API. And also, I believe if I think the changes should be monitored and tracked by both the teams before releasing into production or whatever. in
Okay.
that.
Okay. So, anybody want to tackle the third question? Does diversity outweigh coordination costs? Let me rephrase it. At what point in a project does having autonomous teams, your agile teams, have more of a cost to the project than having direct and formalized coordination?
I think here diversity can doesn't in this case maybe our diversity like having two different teams is causing an issue, but ideally if the structure or the contract of the API was well handled, a change in like backend system should automatically update the change in front end, and that should not cause like an outage. And in that scenario, diversity is like preferable. I would say a better approach because we divide it into multiple services, which has ownership among different teams. So every person does not have to learn end to end about the application and just works on his particular area of expertise.
Okay. On the changes and everything, through documentation, do you think a centralized depository, for all changes and information, would that be helpful when you have div diversified teams?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Most of the teams I worked on, we're agile teams. I've been on projects where there's like 3 different teams, but what we all do is use something like Google Docs or GitHub or something like that, where we post changes and everything so that everybody at the same time, has the information. All right.
The enterprise software engineer is both a contributor and a steward. Local decisions affect system-wide behavior. A schema adjustment influences compliance reporting. Performance optimization may alter security posture. Systems thinking becomes a professional obligation. Engineers must understand dependencies, operational realities, and failure propagation. Risk identification is part of the role. Communicating technical risk in strategic engineering and
So now we're
authority and
looking at the
accountability
software engineer,
must be
their
a lateral integrity.
responsibilities. So we have a senior engineer flags a security flaw, but management insists on launch to meet market deadlines. So here's the big one. Who should own the final architectural authority?
I think it is senior engineer responsibility, at least the engineer should echo the concern and severity, of the security flaw. Even then, management wants to go ahead and launch the product into the market. Then maybe write a formal, document his findings in his findings in a formal channel, and give it to the management so that the risk properly transferred to the management.
Okay. Yeah, there is a rule in project management that states the project sponsor owns the project. All, the people that are on the team can only make the sponsor aware of the risk, but the final say-so about a project is the project sponsor. So in this case, is the management. You're right. Write it down formally, put it into the documentation, because then it affirms that management made the decision. So they're the ones that need to accept the risk. Okay. I think we covered number 2. If you have this and you have management saying, nope, we want it right now, what kind of long-term impact may follow?
I think there are 2 things, right? One, there would be immediate impact for sure. So if there is security flaw, someone might exploit that flaw for sure. So we have to get ready for that. And second thing, it is a tech debt from the development team also. So we had to, maybe in the next release, we had to fix that security flaw. So team has to be ready for both of these things.
Yep. It'd probably be more costly, by fixing something that should have been mitigated immediately by by when the securities or engineers said, hey, there's an issue. Management should have said, hey, fix it before we release. All right, good.
Feasibility analysis protects enterprise portfolios from misallocation. Technical feasibility evaluates integration viability and architectural compatibility. Economic feasibility assesses lifecycle cost relative to projected benefit. Operational feasibility examines readiness for adoption, training, and support. Strategic alignment ensures initiatives reinforce enterprise direction rather than local optimization. Evidence-based go or no-go decisions require structured documentation, risk registers, and defined governance checkpoints.
Okay. Have any of you been part of a feasibility study for a project?
Yes, Professor.
So, can you just give me a brief little thing about what you did?
So we wanted to implement a new like third-party application, and we wanted to do a feasibility test with our current requirement. So we had to think about operational efficiency, or like how fast they can adapt, and then we have to think about the economical, the points that were mentioned there. So we did an initial pilot test to see how it works for our current requirement that was there at the time. And then we had to do the pros and cons, and that's how we proceeded. I mean, I can give you in depth of like what's the project, but that's the overview.
Yeah, no, that's great overview. Yeah. The basically in, each one of these feasibilities, you're wanting to see if the effort that you're going to do towards the project is actually worth it. So feasibility studies help or will help the cost risk benefit or cost benefit analysis. So, all right, very good. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
So here's our scenario. Executives are pressured to approve a new analytics platform without defined data ownership or operational support planning. So what do you think? What kind of documentation is missing?
Data ownership, like there's no clear owner of the actual data itself. So it makes it difficult to say to maybe define what team owns this data, like manage that data itself, or like often define like access control, what team can access that data. So
Okay.
that is
Do you
one
think
for sure.
security comes in with that?
Yeah, I think security definitely comes in with that. Like a couple of the other scenario mentioned about like HIPAA concern, like people having some of that data leak, like maybe medical data or something like that, or like financial related data. Some of the stuff can be like more of a concern. Users having access to some of those data that they shouldn't have access to. So that can be a security risk for the team, and also an issue with regulators and stuff like that.
Okay. So when we're looking at feasibility studies, one of them, should be, are we able to protect the data? Okay, and that's one of those operational feasibilities types things. So should urgency override feasibility gaps? Let's say you did find, well, let's go back to, the other scenario. There was a security leak. So should urgency, the executives want this new system up and running now. Should that urgency override any feasibility gaps that were noticed?
No, I believe no, it shouldn't, because in the long run, it might affect a lot than what you're losing today.
Okay. Especially if you bring this analytics platform up, and all of a sudden you have data being captured or hacked into. That will ruin your analytics for one thing, but also you now have your client not trusting you anymore. All right.
Prototypes reduce uncertainty by externalizing assumptions. Stakeholders ending only after interacting with a working representation. Prototyping validates workflow logic, user interaction patterns, and the completeness of requirements. However, prototypes must be evaluated with measurable criteria. Usability alone is insufficient. Scalability, integration compatibility, and security implications must be assessed before advancing. Governance must clearly distinguish learning artifacts from committed production scope.
Okay, so now we're looking at prototyping. Have any of you worked with prototyping tools like Figma or anything like that?
I think I've seen Figma mocks before, like mostly for UI development where
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my marketing team uses the Figma design for us to create the backend code for it. So I'm a little bit aware of the Figma one.
Okay. Yeah, that's just one prototyping tool. There's several out there. Okay. And so a prototype search feature performs well in demonstrations, but lacks scalability and security testing. So what objective metrics must be evaluated in this case?
I think the objective of prototyping is basically to test whether the proposed system, right, will solve the use case. So if it does, then team can go deeper and see how to implement and what could be the security issues, what could be the implementation details and all. But high level prototype is basically a kind of feasibility, I would say. So whether whatever the design we are thinking, would it solve the use case or not?
Okay.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think what you're looking for, yeah, is like kind of the performance metrics, since you're looking at from a scalability perspective anyway. Like how is the system performing under load? So like maybe metrics like the P95, P99, how is it performing for like, 99% of the customer, looking at some of those latency and determining stuff like the throughput and how the CPU, memory, and stuff like that in terms of services hosting that, but just looking at overall, like from a scaling perspective, like the latency and the performance there.
Okay. So let's say you have a project and you have stakeholders that really like the look of it and everything like that, but is that insufficient for prototype evaluations? Just saying they come in, they love the look of it. Is that sufficient?
I don't think it's sufficient. I think from the design might be great, but obviously, like the scalability is a big concern. It depends on how many users are using that particular feature itself. If the design look great, but you have millions of users using that particular new feature, and then they're having a very degraded performance, and that's a problem. Users starts to complain, which leaves like a lot of negative feedback. So I'll say why the visual element can be great, but like performance concerns or like even security concerns can also be like an issue there.
Okay. Yeah, and in another class I teach about prototyping, it's that you have the low level, medium level, and high level prototypes and functionalities. Yeah. Usually what happens is that you have your stakeholders, they love the high level because that's where you show them all the bells and whistles, but they don't like looking at the low level or the medium level functionality of your prototypes because it's boring to them, because it's how things work. But that's the level that you really need to have stakeholders involvement and enthusiasm, is to understand how things are going to work. All right.
Object orientation structures systems around interacting entities. Encapsulation protects invariance. Abstraction reduces cognitive load. These principles support coordination across large teams. Inheritance and polymorphism enable extensibility, but must be managed carefully on a scale. Enterprises often prefer composition to avoid rigid hierarchies. OO modeling remains dominant in analysis and UML documentation because it aligns with how enterprises conceptualize domain entities.
Okay. Any of you program with object-oriented languages?
Yes.
Okay. Which one?
Mostly Java.
Okay. I'm very familiar with Java. Okay. And so we have an architecture team debates replacing its object-oriented system with microservices using functional paradigms. Okay. So basically, you're using your Java, a Java-based system, and now they want to use microservices, like AWS, for doing things. So what advantages does object-oriented programs still provide?
Mostly just domain itself. Like in object-oriented programming, you can kind of define different data model into their own domain. For example, parsing people, stuff like that. It makes it easy to like visualize, so like customer or like orders and stuff like that. So I think you lose some of that benefit, in my own opinion, especially when you're developing a more big system.
Okay. All right. So we'll just skip to number 3. Should modeling drive implementation of a new system? Okay, just think about that when you're working on the in-class exercise. Oop.
Enterprise decision-making operates within constraint trade-offs. Expanding the scope increases cost and schedule pressure. Accelerating the schedule often reduces quality and security posture. Security has become a first-order constraint due to regulatory penalties and reputational risk. Constraint balancing is continuous, not episodic. Governance mechanisms exist to recalibrate trade-offs as projects evolve.
So has anybody heard of the iron triangle from project management? Okay. What the iron triangle is that you have 3 parts to a project. You have time, cost, and scope. Any changes to any one of those changes the others. If you add more scope, it increases your time and your cost. If you if you shrink your time, the scope isn't impacted. If you take away money, your scope is impacted. So, like it was saying, anytime you make changes, it's going to change quality, your schedule, everything. So we have a scenario: a customer portal launches on schedule after shortening the security reviews. Okay, so keep that in mind. Data exposure issues appear post-release. Which constraint dominated in this?
think they reduced the scope of the security reviews. So I would say scope
Okay.
was terminated.
But what's the scope? Is the scope, well, the total scope was the portal, and it launches on schedule after they shortened the security reviews. Wouldn't that be the time constraint?
Yeah, it is time constraint for security reviews, right? So they did not get enough time to thoroughly review the system.
Right. Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's go through.
Team productivity emerges from structure, not individual heroics. Clear communication pathways reduce ambiguity and the propagation of defects. Toolchain integration stabilizes environments and accelerates feedback loops. Standards governance preserves architectural consistency. Continuous improvement requires disciplined retrospectives supported by meaningful metrics. Sustainable efficiency balances speed with system health.
Okay. Leadership adds developers to a delayed project without stabilizing environments or clarifying interfaces. Productivity drops. Why did adding personnel fail, do you think?
So I think issues with environment and clarification among the interfaces, right? So if you don't have clarity on those items, because those are very crucial, even if you add more developers, so if there is no clarity who does what and which is the stable environment or who takes the responsibility to make it stable and all, so that will basically delays and get the deliverable, and everybody basically end up waiting, so there won't be much productivity.
Okay. In project management, there's a saying that we have, is that if you're deep into the project, you don't add people. And the main reason you don't, it takes time for those people to get up to speed about what's going on in the project. And because, you're taking time to bring other people back up, up to speed on where the project currently is, you are no longer productive on the project itself. So, all right. So what you said, also that tidbit about project management, the leadership should know, okay, you don't add more people to a problem. Okay. You figure out what the issues are and work on that.
Enterprise systems are fundamentally information systems. Data architecture determines reporting accuracy, compliance capability, and integration viability. Poor data modeling creates long-term fragility that cannot be patched at the interface level. Process modeling complements object modeling by describing information flow across organizational boundaries. Integration architecture must align APIs, data warehouses, and governance policy. Documentation in this context functions as institutional memory and risk mitigation, preserving knowledge across personnel transitions.
Okay. And that's it. Okay. Let me stop sharing this. All right, welcome to the rest that showed up. Okay, how's everybody doing?
Good.
This is the way that I do mine. I don't want to speak for a whole hour, so I like showing some things and then having everybody just come in and discuss. So don't be shy. Okay, there's no right or wrong answers. I just want to hear your opinion. It's called critical thinking. So I want to make sure that everybody gets involved in that. Now, what's going to happen is that for the first hour is lecture. for this next 2 hours, you guys will be working in small teams, working on a project. So I'll pull the documentation up and I'll show you what you're going to be working on. All right. So what you should be able to see now is the document. I'll be putting a copy up into the chat so that you can download it. It's also in the announcements, and so you'll know exactly. So what you're going to be doing is that I've got you in 4 teams. You'll see what team you're in, so that means there's going to be 4 breakout rooms. What you're going to be doing is that we have an enterprise, VitaTrack Enterprise Solutions. You're going to be designing a mobile health and wellness platform. Okay. The platform includes a mobile application for end users, administrative web portal for staff, a cloud-hosted backend, and reporting capability for aggregated analytics. Your team is expected to consider functional requirements, non-functional requirements, security risks, verification, and validation strategies. Now, this covers the next 7 weeks. Okay, here's your scope. Mobile application for end users, administrative web portal for internal staff, backend services and APIs, data storage, database design, security, privacy, testing and quality assurance, project management approach and team structure, SML or UML documentation. So each week, one team member will submit the team package on behalf of the group. Okay, just one team member. And you'll be posting it under the social forums. And you'll see in there, I have a week 1 where your teams will post. Okay. What you're going to be doing, each team member must contribute. Okay. So all you have to do is, in what's ever being done, what you can, what each member did. What's this? I said, what is the structure? Here's your guidance or key definitions. What is a user story? What are use cases? You'll be using UML in this class, so you got to get familiar with it. Use cases. Here's what non-functional requirements are. What is a requirements traceability matrix? Threat modeling and risk matrix. Okay, this is the UMLs, what you're going to be working on producing for what your team is doing. Okay, there's a risk management register. There's a requirements traceability matrix. Okay, so on the bottom, okay, all that's a lead up to here. This is what your week 1 exercise is. each team this, and more than what I'll be expecting, and I see this before, is that each team's going to have a different approach to this. But what has to happen? You got to come up with a project charter, just one page, that includes problem statement. What's the problem? Business justification, stakeholders, high-level scope, assumptions, and constraints. Okay. And now on the stakeholders, you can make up whoever you think are stakeholders based off of what the scenario is. Then you're going to have an agile justification memo, 1 to 2 pages, explaining why an agile approach is appropriate for this. And then also include an outline of your sprint cadence and any working agreements, okay, within your team. Now, remember, had classmates mentioned that most sprints are like 1 or 2 weeks, which is right. The longest one I've ever seen in an agile thing was a 4-week one, and that was terrible. All right, initial product backlog containing at least 8 epics with brief descriptions. You'll have to look at what epics are. A go or go no analysis on 1 page addressing technical feasibility, economic feasibility, and organizational feasibility. That's why I brought up feasibility studies. Okay. The charter must be specific and must avoid generic statements. The backlog epics must align to the charter's scope. Feasibility analysis must cite contract assumptions such as expected user scale, data sensitivity, and operational constraints. This is why you've got 2 hours to work on this. You'll probably have to go through and just see what epics are. Those that have done that are in Agile, you know that you have user stories and you have epics. Epics are the big picture and everything. So that's what you're going to be doing. I'll post that. I'll show you here. Let's see. Let me pull up my area here. Let me do a stop share and reshare. Okay, when you go into Gap, under general, you'll notice there's a called social forum. Come through here. You click on that and you'll see all of these. The one that you'll see tonight is the in-class scenario and week 1 in-class exercise. The in-class exercise has its documentation. I'm going to give it to you in the chat, but it has the documentation there if you ever need to go back. Then if you, whoever's going to post for you from your team, just do the in-class exercise. It comes up and just do a reply, and then you put what your solutions are. Any questions before I put you into breakout rooms?
Yes, Professor, I have a question. So,
Yeah.
so the expectation is that you have to produce, as a team, we have to produce those documents and present it to the class today, or
No, you don't present to the class. You post it today.
or today, during the class itself, or there'll be like we have to post it by Thursday or Sunday, or there'll be deadline.
No. This is this is what you get your participation points for.
Okay.
This is what you're going to be spending your next 2 hours on. You get as much of it as done as you can.
Yeah, I mean, in 2 hours, we may not have, I mean, sometimes we may not able to finish the document completely, right? So is it okay if we still upload?
No, it has to be uploaded today.
Okay, even if it is not completely completed, like.
That's what I just said.
Okay, sure. Okay.
Yeah, get as much of it as you've done.
Mhm.
Here's the thing that next week, okay, it's just like this is running like an agile thing. Okay. Your timeline is tonight. So what you don't get finished tonight, when we have our next week meeting, you'll get done what you need to get done, plus whatever the new thing is. This is being run like an agile project, okay?
Okay.
All right. So let me stop sharing this.
Professor, I have one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, from the description just now, it seems like each of us need to upload a personal memo.
No. Oh, no. What you can do is in your project charter, down at the bottom, just put in each person that's on your team, just put a statement.
Okay, so in the social form.
Yeah.
Okay,
well,
so
yeah. When you post your project charter in the social forum, in that project charter, you have those different parts. Down on the bottom, each team member can put their own statement.
Okay, I see.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So let me do this. And one of the things that you'll see is that this document will give you everything for the rest of the class. So this way, you can prepare yourselves, once you get your team together. All right. So, and also in this document, everybody make sure you get a copy of it, is your team assignment. So when I open up the 4 rooms, make sure you go to the right ones. Okay. Did the document show up? Okay. Make sure you get a copy of that. Okay, I'm going to do the breakout rooms. Let's see here. I put you in all your rooms until you get used to it. Then later on, you'll be able to get into your own rooms. If you need any help, I'll be out here. So you have until
Hello, Professor.
yeah, what's up?
I'm in the group D, and it seems like our team has 4 people, but we are missing Karen. We're not sure if he's here or not.
Okay, no, one team. There's you have 3 teams, so 3, and yours is with 4, but it's okay. And I have one team that only has 2 people in it right now.
Okay, I see.
So, yep. So what happens is that person is counted as absent and doesn't get any participation points.
Okay, I see. I just want to make sure if he's here but not in the room or he's absent.
No, we've got everybody's been put in there.
Okay,
Let's see.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I will go back to do the work. Thank you so much.
Sure. Uh-huh.
Hey, Professor.
Yay, let's see here. All right.
Professor, I have a question. So I'm looking at the document that you shared with us. So there is this statement, for team accountability. Each student, to support accountability, each student will submit on-page individual reflection memo each
Okay.
week.
I guess you didn't hear me before you went to the breakout rooms.
Yeah,
It didn't have to be individual. You could put your statement on the project charter.
okay, so you want us to explicitly call out that this person contributed this content?
Yeah, I
Okay,
have to know what everybody participated in.
sure.
Okay.
Yep.
So just make sure that somebody from your team posts whatever you have completed in the social forum, and everybody can have a good night. Or I wish everybody a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Good
Thank
night.
you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor. Have a good night.
See you
you.
next
Bye.
week.
See you.
Bye.
Hi, Professor. I have a quick question. So
Yeah.
I can submit the attached doc, right? Do I have to paste all of the text in?
Just submit submit the document. Mhm.
Oh, okay. Documents then. Okay.
Yep.
I'll answer. Okay, good. Thank you so much.
All right.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Good night. All right. Good night.